Hi everyone, so I'm going to show you how I make my continuous brew kombucha in this 35 litre batch here. And I couldn't find much information online about this kind of continuous brewing system, especially just keeping it simple and just the kind of need to know facts, tools and measurements that you need. So I thought I'd share this with people. So for those who don't know, continuous brewing is a little bit better than brewing in batches of kombucha because you've got the Scoby fermenting the whole time. So you're essentially just tapping off kombucha and you having it kind of as you go, and then you can fill up with more tea, which the Scoby then will basically ferment with sugar. So you essentially can just have this never-ending supply of kombucha. If you do want to take a pause, so I did this for about a year and there was so much kombucha in my fridge that I decided to take a pause. A nice little bonus is you end up in the bottom here if you let the thing over ferment for a while with kombucha vinegar, which I discovered is actually really good. It's really good for you to drink just in small like teaspoons or little cups, or you can put it on salads and things, so it's kind of a super drink as well. So lots of benefits there. So I'll share in the notes in the description below, I'll share a link to all of the tools that I'm using, and I have some calculations. I'm going to go basically based on this system, which is a 35 litre bit of kit. There's 35 litres of water in there. So what I can do is, if you want in the comments, I have a calculation that I use to work this out. So if you let me know your own system, I can sort of share the calculation I used with you to get to the same numbers. But I know this works. I did it once before and it came out really great. So without further ado, here is how I do it. So first things first, obviously you're going to need to have something to put the kombucha in. So I'm going for this, which is actually a beer brewer. It's a Class Steam product, and you can see the spec here on the back. So I think that's got the model number somewhere there, and you can see it's a beer boiler. So the idea is it's for boiling beer. It's a 3000 watt device, 35 litres. So the key features I was looking for here, and I'll put a link to the description for hopefully I can find this or a similar one, is to have a tap like this that you can easily tap off. Lower down the better, really. I find this is actually a little bit too high because you still get a little bit of kombucha you have to kind of pour out if you've got this last bit here to get out, but that's really useful, and to be able to close off the tap. Having a lid like this is really useful that you can actually secure on. It was really good. It does have a little hole in it, which I actually find kind of annoying. So I actually end up taping this over. It's actually burst, but I'll put some Gorilla Tape just over there just to seal off the hole. So I just think that's a bit better for the brewing system. But also the feature to look for here is a filter. So in here, I don't know if you can see with the camera, it's a bit hard to show you with the steam, but you'll see that there's this device in the middle here. This inner circle is like a massive filter, so perfect for brewing tea. Essentially you can just throw all the tea in there, and once it's brewed you can just lift the whole thing up when it's cooled down, and you can take the tea out, which is what you want to do. So typically doing this in quite large numbers is like 35 litres is quite troublesome to find this much, you know, with pots and so on, to kind of brew as much tea like this. It becomes quite fiddly, so I just find having it all in one device is great. And finally, the feature that you're really looking for is the heater. So this is obviously key to heat up the tea. So the good thing about this beer brewer, it comes with a built-in heater, and it'll go up to 100 degrees. You can do all sorts of clever things with the time, like keeping it at a certain temperature for a certain period of time. So this is really useful, and also useful for the actual fermentation process to control the temperature a little bit more specifically when you do that as well. So firstly, with the tea that I'm using, so you can see how I started preparing my tea bag. So there's all kinds of information on the internet. Don't trust everything you read on the internet. So I find with fermenting, there's a whole community of people that just get really obsessed with what you can't do when it comes to fermenting, and how it's a cardinal sin against humanity to do certain things. I just find that's ridiculous. I find actually fermenting is super easy. Making kombucha is way easier than people make out on the internet. And you can follow this religious process of only ever using certain things and whatnot, but whatever. I just kind of just go with it and do the best I can. I have an organic tea, so I'm trying to make this as kind of natural as possible. But I use tea bags, and there's many people that will say never use tea bags, all hell will break loose if you use tea bags because it will be a papery taste, and I've never found that to be the case. So yeah, whatever works. I just find actually fermenting is a lot more simple than it makes out. So don't let that put you off if you want to get into this, because I've just found if you just go with the flow, it's actually fine. So tea bags, I'm using a mix of green tea and black tea. So some people prefer to use just black tea. It's just a taste preference. I think there are some health benefits as well using green tea. It has a different sort of property in there. So I use a mixture, and I'm using 60 tea bags, 60 in total, for 35 litres of water. So you can kind of extrapolate from there the measurements you'll need to use. So what I basically first of all do, it's a little bit time consuming actually using tea bags, because I take them out of the bag. First of all, you've got to unpack them, as you can see below. I've been doing that, and I actually just go ahead and cut off the little paper tags. You probably wouldn't need to, but it just feels better not to have the paper in there when you're brewing it with this kind of thing. So yeah, I've ended up here with 60 bags, 30 black, I'm using English breakfast, and then 30 green. So the next thing I'm going to do is I've heated this up to, I believe, 98 degrees. It will drop up and down a little bit as it brews, so you can see it's actually just kicked in now and starting to go up. So this is what the heater is doing. It works a bit more consistently when you have the lid on as well. So I'm going to go up to 98 degrees, and then I'm going to put the tea in, and I'm going to leave the tea. I'm just going to dump it all in the top here, and I'm going to leave it for 30 minutes. And so 30 minutes brewing, and then what I'm going to do is put it down to 30 degrees. At that point, I'm going to add the sugar in, which I'll show you in a minute. And basically, I leave the tea bags in there whilst the sugar's in there for an additional hour. So in total, the tea is steeping for, I guess, 1 hour and 30 minutes, although it's the first 30 minutes I'm doing at this higher 98 degrees. I lower it down to 30, and I just let the device, I turn it on, it's essentially turning it off, but you're keeping it at 30, just so that there's something to dissolve the sugar still. And yeah, I keep the tea bags in there. I think I found last time when I tested just with the 30 minutes, it just wasn't quite strong enough, so I gave it a little bit of additional steeping time. You don't want to like over steep the tea either, so I just felt that doing it at a lower temperature worked. There's probably different ways to do this, and this is just the way I found worked for me. So I'm going to go ahead and put the tea bags in. So yeah, simple as that. Nothing complicated here. You're just basically dumping them in there. So all of the 60 tea bags, 30 green, 30 black, it's going in. What I'll do is I'll get something to poke them in a little bit so they sink down. So here I'm going to use this spoon here just to poke them in a little bit. So again, people on the internet are going to yell at you for putting anything in fermented systems, and I've generally found that it's quite difficult to ruin your ferments. There's all sorts of things about not using like certain types of wood or plastic, or only use stainless steel that's been heated from a blah blah blah, but I just find it's really just a bit overkill, and generally it's quite hard to go wrong. Obviously make sure the items are quite clean when you use them. Ideally kind of like put them in boiling water or do something like that. So obviously you get any contaminants, you're going to ruin the whole batch. You probably don't want to be doing that with this amount of tea. So anyhow, we're going to shove that down. So that's going to then sit there for 30 minutes whilst that steeps. I'm going to put the lid on. Just let that sit for 30 minutes. Okay, so that's finished brewing now. So sugar-wise, I'm just using normal sugar here, caster sugar. This is a Swedish version of caster sugar. And so I believe it's 50 grams of sugar per litre. I think that was the calculation that I used. I'll put this down in the description as well. And so for my specific setup, 35 litres, it was 1,750 grams, so 1.75 kilograms, I believe that is. So I'm going to just measure that out and stick the sugar in straight away now. So this has been 30 minutes. And then what I'm going to do is move this down to 30 degrees. So I'm going to turn this on and put this down to 30 degrees. And I'm going to keep the tea bags in there when I do that, and just let it steep a little bit further. And by keeping it hot, basically it's just kind of going to melt the sugar and make sure that all kind of dissolves properly in there. So 1.75 kilograms of sugar going in. Looks like a lot of crazy amount of sugar, and it is, but the Scoby, when that goes in, will eat up the sugar. So people think, oh, kombucha has sugar in it, but actually the Scoby consumes the sugar as part of the fermentation process. So don't worry about that, but you can of course add sugar later on as well if you want to make it sweeter, but that's your choice. So that's gone in, so now I'm just going to wait another hour whilst that cools down to 30 degrees.
Now we have taken out the tea bags.
Indeed, we have taken out the tea bags. So we've done an extra hour on there. And it's cooling. It still hasn't quite got to 30 degrees, but we've taken out the tea bags, so we don't want the tea to oversteep. And there it is. So now just waiting for this to cool down a bit. Okay, so now we're going to put the Scoby in. This is one I bought on the internet. You can get them from Amazon and all kinds of places. You can use an existing Scoby as well if you've already got one from before. This is a fresh one. It's a starter set. And yeah, you basically just put the Scoby in. Nothing too complicated here. So you want to make sure that the lid then is nice and sealed. So go ahead and lock the device down. This particular unit has these kind of locking arms, and you just want to check that there's no holes. Sometimes like this one has a hole, you want to tape that up with some Gorilla Tape or something similar. Okay, so we're almost at the 2 weeks mark now, and so actually tomorrow will be 2 weeks, so it's been 13 days exactly. And as you can see, we've got some activity definitely going on here. So this all looks good and normal. So the Scoby has started to grow, as you can see. And yeah, we've got a nice kind of funky kombucha smell kind of coming out here. So all looking good so far. So that Scoby is basically going to now grow to the entire size of the container. So I'm going to give that a bit longer. And what we're sort of waiting for really at this point is to get kind of a point where if you give it a taste, it's kind of tasting, kind of got that punchy, fermented kind of vinegary kind of vibe to it before we actually take it out and bottle it for the second fermentation. So I just poured myself a little bit of this, and yeah, it's definitely getting there. It still has some work to go. So giving this a quick taste, it still tastes quite sweet. So it's got like a bit of a kombucha vibe coming through, but quite weak, I would say, and generally it's still very sugary. So if I was to taste this 2 weeks ago, this would be mega sugary, just basically tastes like sugary tea. So it's definitely working its magic, just needs a bit more time. So it's always good with these kind of volumes. Obviously, if you're doing different volumes, I think quite a good way to test this is basically just to taste as you go. So I'm going to give that a bit longer.
33 days later.
Okay, 33 days later. So quite a while, just over a month. And check this out. Got some serious Scoby funk action going on here. So it actually took a little bit longer than I expected. I guess there's different factors for this, probably how much sugar you feed, what kind of Scoby you use. It's going to vary, the temperature. So I've not been too religious about any of these kind of different things. I seem to recall last time it was a bit faster, but anyway, you just the best way to test this really is to do a taste test. Okay, gonna give it a little taste. Yeah, so I'd say that is pretty ready now. So with the 33-day mark, it's tasting a little bit more. I've got that kind of slightly more acidic, vinegary tang coming through. It's a lot less sweet. So when I tasted this before, it's nowhere near ready. It was too sweet. Some of this is a little bit preference. And don't forget, we're still going to ferment it a tiny bit further when we do the second fermentation. And that's what's going to add the bubbles. So you won't get bubbles during this phase. It's basically just going to be the taste that you're going for. So just kind of imagine what this would taste like if it was carbonated with bubbles. And I think it's pretty much there. Yeah, it sort of has that definite sort of funky fermented kombucha taste. It's got a bit more of an acidic kind of vinegar taste coming through. It's not too sweet. So I think this is perfect now for adding flavourings and doing the second fermentation. Do you want to taste, Nora? What do you think? What do you think?
Good.
Is it ready? Okay, quick break for a little request. Hit the subscribe button below and follow me on YouTube, and I'll be super grateful. If you're enjoying the video, it helps me to make more videos like this, and I'll be posting a few more weird and wonderful videos on how-tos that I come across. So we'd be really grateful, wouldn't we? Okay, so the next step is you're going to need to find a bottle to put the kombucha into. where you're going to basically optionally add flavouring, a little bit of extra sugar, and then you're going to do a second fermentation. So first things first, like what kind of bottle to use. I find these bottles are really, really good. I've had these for ages actually. They're old German beer bottles that I managed to actually get from Germany, super cheap. But yeah, these are really good. These lids are really robust and find they work quite well. Okay, now we're going to talk about
Kombucha flavouring.
kombucha flavouring, that's right. So when you do the second fermentation, you're basically adding bubbles, but it's also the opportunity to flavour the kombucha, which gives it a kind of nice taste. You're going to get a lot of nice flavour from the kombucha itself, and adding extra flavouring is really just optional. So you don't have to do this, but many like to experiment with different flavours to get their kombucha tasting nice. So things like this, you've got apple juice. I'm going to experiment a bit this time with apple and raspberry juice. You've got here also apple and raspberry juice. So I'm going to experiment. There's a really good flavour that I tasted in Stockholm in Sweden actually recently, which was cucumber and mint. So I'm going to basically take the skin off and blend this up, and then I'm going to put some mint in there and use that for flavouring. You can use frozen berries as well. Ginger is a classic. So these kind of things like frozen mango, you've got frozen raspberries there, hallon in Swedish. So yeah, so these kind of things all work well. I mean, you can experiment with different things. What sort of flavour would you like to use, Frey?
Mango.
Mango, is that your favourite? I think we're good for juices now, so we're going to start putting the sugar into the bottles. Okay, this is one with the sugar that's gone in, so I'm just going to pour a bit of juice in there. Let's have a look, probably, yeah, about that much, maybe a little bit more. You can experiment with the different levels, but I just generally kind of eyeball it around that much juice. Then in goes the kombucha, so just going to fill that up. Some people say to leave an air gap at the top. I've heard quite a few people say it doesn't really make much of a difference, so generally I just leave a little bit of a gap at the top just so it doesn't spill everywhere. So there's the kombucha gone in as well. So we've mixed in there, you've got the sugar, you've got the juice, and you've got the kombucha. So we're just basically going to put the lid on. And then, so this is going to go into a dark place inside somewhere. So room temperature is fine. And you want to be putting it into somewhere with no light. So I have a little cupboard here I tend to use. Yeah, when the door is shut, the light goes off. Or just like in a little cupboard, like up here, for example, where the door's closed. So, and you want to be putting that in, and that's going to start the fermentation process going again for the second time. And then when it's ready, flavour-wise, you want to be then moving it to the fridge, which is going to stop the fermentation process entirely. So once it goes in the fridge, it is going to ferment like a little bit, but not very much. It essentially kind of halts the fermentation process. So, and then it's ready to drink. So you want to experiment with different amounts of time for the second fermentation. Some people say 2 or 3 days. Some people say a week. The more you leave it, the more bubbly it's going to get, and also the risk might be it could actually over ferment, where it starts to get too vinegary and too strong fermentation wise. So you want to experiment a bit. I find about kind of 3-4 days is the sweet spot to leave it for the second fermentation, and then it tastes great. So you can see here as well that the container is now half full. So we've drained down quite a lot of the Scoby. It was about, I think it was 30 litres if I remember rightly. So what we can basically do in a couple of pointers. First of all, the Scoby was actually a little bit stuck on the side when I opened this, when we drained it. So I washed my hands carefully and kind of gave them a bit of help back down. It's perfectly fine. If you've got clean hands or a clean utensil, you can move the Scoby around. That's fine. Just be careful not to contaminate it. And so, yeah, you can see how nicely this thing has grown. So it's turned into a monster mother Scoby, which is going to start forming layers. And basically then you can essentially take the layers off and then start new kombucha batches. So as this gets older and older, you can start doing that and giving them to friends if they want to start kombucha. I've found you can actually cut these as well. So they are quite big in this container, so you can cut them up and put them in. And generally, if you want to keep them, just put them into the fridge with some of the starter liquid here, and that will keep for some months in the fridge, and you can give it to someone as a gift or whatever. So it's a nice way to then multiply more kombucha for other people. So that's that. So now as the next step, if you wanted to then continue with the continuous brewing system, basically all you would do now is fill this up with tea again. So if you fill it up with tea, the same process as at the start of the video, just filling it up to the top. That will basically dilute it down, and then it will start the fermentation process again. Have a bit of a head start this time because you've got quite a lot of fermentation already going in there. So you're probably looking at least half the time or so. So just keep an eye on it and keep tasting it. And then what's ever left in the bottom, I use for vinegar. So I leave that for an extra long time, some months in the bottom, and it just and keep tasting it. And eventually it turns into nice vinegar. So a bit like apple cider vinegar, but a kombucha, super probiotic version of that. Okay, so this was the finished kombucha. I was pretty happy with how it turned out. Nice and bubbly, fruity kombucha. This will store for a good few months in the fridge, and I found it probably would even go a little bit longer than that. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video and enjoy the process making your kombucha. Let me know how it goes in the comments.